Hello everyone, we're going to help you now set up a baseline grid with some horizontal modular guides. We're just going to look here briefly at this little sketch to help you think about your space. So I want you to sketch a bit of a rough idea of your layout that you want with the specific thought to what you want to put in terms of your margins for your inside and outside. Start to think about whether you're not going to have any perhaps page numbering system or whatnot. The bottom and top margins, these you have to be relatively precise with at the outset, because they're going to be determined by the baseline grid we choose. We'll go straight to InDesign and we're going to set up a new document. So Command N, go to Print, go to Preset of A4. Let's just save it as brand book template, but I'm going to use points, and I'd like you to use points for the sake of this setup. You can always change the increments later, but this is going to help us to make our vertical grid align better with our margins. Click on vertical orientation, make sure facing pages is selected. We're going to come back to the columns once we get inside. Now at any time in InDesign, if you've got a measuring system that's not what you used to, you can always override it. So here I'm going to just type 3mm for millimeter, hit tab, and it's going to populate the equivalent of that in points, 8.5 point. Hit OK. So here we are inside the document. If you click on my pages icon, I can see that I can now add various pages, of course. So what I want you to do then is double click in your master page icon. We are now inside master pages. Hold down Shift and click on the second page. So if we go up to layout and we go down to margins and columns, I want you to input here your margins and columns that you've decided for your document and the number of columns you'd like. So in my case, I would like to have a little bit larger top margin, a little bit larger than the preset bottom, and I want quite a lot larger point size or measurement for my outside. Then input the number of columns you want. I'm going to suggest you try 5. 5 columns gives you a fair bit of flexibility. It means you can have one column for, say, a caption column, paragraph, I should say, and then you can use 2 of these for perhaps your standard body text dimension. You might even have some body text stretching across 3 columns. Now the gutter is important to establish at some point, so I'm going to do it now. I'm going to opt for about 15 points. If you have this gutter too small, when you have 2 lots of body text sitting next to each other side by side, the sentences will appear to run into each other. The lines of text will be too close. If it's too large, say about 18 point or 20 point, then there's going to be too much separation between your paragraphs. So I think about 15, somewhere between 12 and 18 points would be good. We'll hit OK. So there we've got our column grid. Now, still while we're in master pages, we're going to go down to create guides. And here I'm going to set up these horizontal guides. So in this case, I want to set up around, kind of roughly a square shape. And most importantly, my gutter, or the space between these 2 horizontal guides, must be exactly the same as my baseline grid. And I'm going to use 12 points for my baseline grid. So there you go, we've got 7 and 12 points. Now if we zoom in, we can see how that's looking. Pretty good. But what we want now is to get in this baseline grid. So to show your baseline grid first, go up to View, down to Grids and Guides, and go down to Show Baseline Grid. And when you turn it on, you'll see the blue lines, and there's a default measurement there of, I think it's 12 points. But they're not lining up with our margins, and we want that. So let's go up to Preferences and go down to Grids. And in here, we want you to go to 0 for start, and we want the starting point to align with the top margin. That means it's going to start here, and very important, make sure it is set to the baseline grid that you want, which is in my case 12 point. Everything else will be fine at those default settings. Okay, so if we look down here now, we can see that, okay, we've got the baseline grid here in blue. Here's my original horizontal columnar guides, horizontal modular guides, but they're not lining up, and I want them to line up precisely. Again, more points of order means more, it looks smarter. So I'm going to now simply adjust my my bottom margin so that it fits. So all you do is go back to margins and columns, and while we're close to the bottom here, I'll adjust my bottom margin so it sort of jumps up a little bit to the very next baseline grid. Done. Now everything else is going to stay the same there, but because I've adjusted the margin, I have to go back and reset my create guides for the horizontals. Now all you do here, we want to go with the same number. I think it was 7 or 8, but I need to remove the existing guide. So click down here and then go back up here to about 7 or 8. I think it was 7 by the looks of that. I can see already that this is starting to line up. So I'll hit OK and I'll just zoom out. Perfect. So that's nicely lined up now, and I can see that my horizontal modular guides are now lining up exactly with the baseline grid. Okay, and that's really what we want. So that then leads you to be able to do things like this. The only other thing I want to suggest you do is when you're in here, there's two options you've got really. The default for the text frame options, shortcut is Command B. The default is that the baseline is always set to be the ascent. In other words, it's going to snap to it based on the ascent or the ascender. We really want it to snap based on the baseline. So all you do is select the text frames, Command B for text frame options, go to the baseline options and hit leading. And you'll see now that the baseline of your body text is going to be set up to be precisely on the baseline of the grid. Now that is, of course, because my paragraph styles for my body text are 9 point on 12 point. So my leading obviously needs to be 12 point for it to line up on that 12 point baseline grid. And the advantage then is that with all of your other headings and subheadings and captions, ideally you'll have multiples of 12 points for their leading as well. That will just allow you to be a little bit more, convenient, if you like. So this is set on 24 point leading, and my fancy heading I think is 36 point. 48 point. So they're multiples of 12. In the case of my captions, if I set that to be multiples of 12, in other words, if it was 12 point, I'll just show you, you'll see it's going to look a little bit bad. So if I set it there, 12 point, just go back to the preview, I think that looks a little bit awkward, too much leading. So it's okay to override your settings according to what looks good. But the baseline grid will just allow you to begin with, a lovely sense of order. So there you go. That's it really. Thanks very much for your time. Obviously you're going to have to set up your paragraph styles according to what you want, but the beauty of paragraph styles is that you can quickly adjust them and the whole document will be changed immediately. So enjoy that. Good luck with your brand books. Over and out.